What if the single most important skill you could develop isn't about working harder, studying more, or even being smarter, but simply about how you open your mouth and connect with another human being? Right now, in this exact moment, someone with half your intelligence and a fraction of your experience is getting the promotion you deserve, winning the client you've been chasing, and earning the respect you've worked years to build. Not because they're better than you, but because they communicate better than you. That's the uncomfortable truth nobody talks about at dinner tables or in performance reviews. And here's what makes it even more frustrating. Communication isn't a gift. It's not something you're born with. It's a skill, a learnable, trainable, mastery-level skill that the top 1% of performers have quietly been developing, while everyone else assumed it was just natural talent. By the time you finish this, you won't just understand communication differently, you'll feel it differently. You'll walk into rooms differently. You'll speak up in meetings with a clarity that makes people lean forward. You'll handle pressure with a calm that makes others wonder what you know that they don't. Because you will know something they don't. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Split-Second Advantage. How Elite Communicators Process. Faster than everyone else. Here's something that might shift how you see every conversation you've ever had. Most people believe communication is about talking. They prepare what they want to say. They rehearse their points. They wait for their turn. And then they wonder why their words land flat, why people don't respond the way they hoped, why certain people in the room always seem to carry more weight even when they say less. The truth? Communication isn't primarily about talking. It's about processing. And the gap between someone who fumbles through conversations and someone who navigates them effortlessly isn't speaking ability. It's the speed and depth at which they process what's happening around them. Think about it this way. Your brain is like a city with millions of roads. Every second, it receives an almost incomprehensible flood of incoming signals. Facial expressions, room temperature, word choices, pauses, posture shifts, emotional undercurrents. Scientists estimate your brain processes around 11 million bits of information every single second. But here's the shocking part. Most people consciously work with only about 40 bits of that. 40 out of 11 million. That means nearly everything happening in a conversation, the real dynamics, the hidden tensions, the unspoken motivations, is flying right past you while you focus on the surface words alone. Elite communicators have trained themselves to catch more of those signals, not through some mystical sixth sense, but through deliberate practice of what I call the split-second advantage, the ability to read, process, and respond to more layers of a conversation than the average person even notices exist. The first layer, contextual awareness. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. Your colleague is speaking. Most people in that room are listening to the words, nodding along, maybe taking notes. But the elite communicator in the corner is running a completely different internal program. They're watching body language. They're registering vocal shifts. They're noticing who looks at whom when a sensitive topic comes up. They're asking themselves, what is this person actually trying to achieve right now? What are they not saying? Who in this room are they really speaking to? What fear or desire is driving this conversation beneath the surface? This is contextual awareness, and it's the difference between participating in a conversation and mastering it. You can start developing this immediately. Practice what I call Three-layer listening. Layer 1, the literal words being spoken. Layer 2, the emotional subtext, what they're actually feeling underneath. Layer 3, the strategic context, what outcome they're maneuvering toward. Most people never leave layer 1. When you operate on all three layers simultaneously, you're not just in the conversation, you're above it, with a bird's-eye view that gives you choices others don't even know exist. The second layer, pattern recognition. Every person you talk to is running on a predictable internal operating system. They have communication patterns, emotional triggers, decision-making styles, and social needs that show up consistently across different situations. Once you learn to recognize those patterns quickly, you stop reacting to people and start responding to who they actually are. Some people need to feel important before they'll be open to your ideas. Others respond almost exclusively to hard data and logical evidence. Some people make decisions based on relationships and how something feels. Others want the bottom line in 30 seconds, or they've mentally left the room. The more pattern libraries you build through observation and practice, the faster you can read someone in the first 2 minutes of a conversation and adjust your entire approach accordingly. This isn't manipulation, it's fluency. The same way a skilled doctor adapts their bedside manner to each patient while still delivering excellent care, you adapt your communication approach while remaining completely authentic. The third layer, predictive processing. Great chess players don't just see the board as it is. They see the board 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. They've already played out multiple scenarios in their mind before they touch a single piece. Elite communicators think the same way. Before walking into any significant conversation, they've already mentally gamed it out. What are the likely pushbacks? What emotional reactions might emerge? What are the 3 different directions this could go? And how do I guide it back toward my objective from each of them? This is why certain people seem to think fast in high-pressure conversations. They're not actually thinking faster in the moment, they're thinking ahead. When you've already rehearsed the difficult turn, navigating it in real life feels less like improvisation and more like executing a plan you've already run successfully. Before your next important conversation, give yourself 10 minutes to mentally simulate it. Play out the likely challenges. Practice your pivots. You'll walk in with a calm confidence that others will notice and wonder about. The fourth layer, emotional processing without emotional hijacking. Here's one of the quietest and most powerful distinctions between average communicators and masters: emotional overhead. Most people are either emotionally numb in conversations, detached, surface level, robotic, or they get completely swept up by the emotional currents in the room. Someone raises their voice and their heart rate spikes. Someone gives vague praise and they spend the next hour analyzing it. Someone challenges their idea and suddenly they're defensive. Elite communicators feel the emotional dynamics in a room. They don't suppress them or ignore them, but they don't get controlled by them either. They've developed the ability to sense what's emotionally happening while remaining strategically clear-headed, like a experienced navigator who can feel the storm around them without losing sight of the compass. Develop this by building what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to name emotions with increasing precision. Not just, I feel bad, but am I frustrated, disappointed, overlooked, misunderstood? Not just, they seem upset, But are they anxious about something? Feeling dismissed? Defensive because they're uncertain? The more precisely you can name what's happening emotionally, the more strategically you can respond to it. The fifth layer, response flexibility. A master carpenter doesn't use only one tool regardless of the material. They read what's in front of them and select from dozens of options in their toolkit, and they can switch between tools smoothly without announcing the switch. The same principle applies to communication. Most people have one or two modes: assertive or passive, logical or emotional, formal or casual. When their default mode isn't working, they push harder on the same approach, like turning a key that doesn't fit and wondering why the door won't open. Elite communicators have built a wide toolkit of approaches and can deploy them fluidly based on what the moment actually needs. One conversation might move from collaborative to direct, to empathetic, to authoritative, all within 20 minutes, because that's what each phase required. This fluidity isn't fake, it's responsive, and building it starts with one simple habit. After every significant conversation, ask yourself, what approach did I use? What approach might have worked better? Over time, your toolkit expands and your switching speed increases. Chapter 2. The Instant Influence Framework. Psychological triggers that work in seconds. Let's be honest about something. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are influencing people. And people are influencing you. Every conversation has a direction. Every interaction leaves someone feeling a certain way. The question isn't whether influence is happening. It's whether you're doing it intentionally or by accident. Understanding the psychological triggers that drive human decisions isn't about manipulation. It's about fluency in the language of human behavior. And once you understand this language, you'll recognize it everywhere. In the conversations that moved you, in the decisions you've made, and in the interactions where you felt inexplicably drawn to say yes. Here are the 7 core triggers that elite communicators have mastered. Trigger 1. Reciprocity. The human brain has a deeply wired need to balance the scales. When someone gives us something, time, attention, a favor, a piece of genuinely useful information, we feel a pull to return the gesture. This isn't a choice, it's biology. But here's where most people get it wrong. They give something and immediately ask for something back. That's not reciprocity. That's a transaction. And people can feel the difference. The elite approach is to become genuinely useful to people before you need anything from them. Share an insight that helps them. Connect them with someone valuable. Give your full, undivided attention when they're speaking. Make your giving feel like generosity, not strategy. When you later need their support, their recommendation, their agreement, the reciprocity balance in their subconscious has been quietly building, and they'll feel pulled to respond. Trigger 2. Social proof. When people are uncertain, they look sideways. They want to know what others like them have done, not just any others. Specifically people they identify with, respect, or aspire to be like. Use this by collecting and deploying targeted social proof. Not generic success stories, but specific examples that mirror your listener's identity. Talking to a risk-averse decision maker, tell them about another careful, methodical person who weighed the same options and chose this path. And here's what happened. Talking to someone who prides themselves on innovation, show them how forward-thinking leaders in their space are already moving in this direction. The tighter the match between your social proof and their self-image, the more magnetic it becomes. Trigger 3. Commitment and consistency. Once a person takes a position, out loud in writing, or even just clearly in their own mind, they feel a powerful psychological drive to stay consistent with that position. It's tied to identity. Changing course feels like admitting they were wrong, and most people will do almost anything to avoid that feeling. Elite communicators don't push people toward decisions. They guide people to state positions that already align with where they want them to go. Ask questions that lead someone to articulate what they already believe. Do you think that regular communication prevents most team breakdowns? When they say yes, and they will, they've just committed to a belief that makes your proposal feel like the natural extension of their own thinking. You're not changing their mind. You're helping them follow their own logic. Trigger 4. Authority. People defer to expertise, not always consciously, but automatically. When someone demonstrates genuine depth of knowledge through specific examples, precise language, confident delivery, the brain categorizes them as a credible source and opens up to their ideas. Real authority isn't about credentials on a wall. It's about communicating like someone who has earned their understanding through real experience. Use precise numbers. Reference specific situations. Speak in declarations rather than hedges. The most effective approach here carries more weight than "I was kind of thinking maybe we could consider." Authority is communicated through certainty, not volume, not aggression, just calm, grounded certainty. Trigger 5. Scarcity. People want what's limited, but crude scarcity, the limited time offer language that shows up in pop-up ads, backfires because it's transparent. Elite communicators create authentic scarcity by helping people understand the real costs of delay. Time is genuinely scarce. Windows of opportunity genuinely close. The cost of indecision genuinely compounds. You don't need to manufacture urgency. You need to help people see the urgency that already exists in their situation. Every month we delay this decision, we're absorbing that cost. That's not pressure. That's honesty. Trigger 6. Liking. This one is beautifully simple and wildly underused. People say yes to people they like, and people like people who are similar to them, who genuinely see and appreciate them, and who feel like they're on the same team. Find authentic common ground, not surface small talk, real shared experiences, similar challenges, mutual values. Give specific, genuine compliments about things you actually notice and appreciate. And above all, position conversations as collaborative problem solving rather than you trying to sell, convince, or win. When someone feels like you're on their side, like you're trying to find the best outcome together, liking happens naturally. Trigger 7. Loss aversion. Decades of research in behavioral psychology have confirmed something counterintuitive. People are more motivated by the fear of losing something than by the prospect of gaining something of equal value. The pain of loss outweighs the pleasure of gain, roughly 2 to 1. Elite communicators don't just paint pictures of what's possible. They also help people see what's at stake if they don't act, not through fear-mongering or manipulation, but through honest, clear-eyed conversations about the costs of staying still. What happens to your competitive position if this doesn't get addressed in the next 6 months? paint the realistic picture of the status quo's true costs, and suddenly moving forward doesn't just seem attractive, it seems necessary. Chapter 3. Strategic Listening. The Secret Weapon You've Been Leaving on the Table. Here's a paradox that might stop you mid-thought. The most persuasive, influential, commanding communicators in the world, the ones who walk into rooms and immediately shift the energy, who leave conversations with agreements others couldn't get, who make people feel deeply understood within minutes of meeting them, are not, first and foremost, great talkers. They're extraordinary listeners, not passive listeners, not polite listeners who nod along while mentally rehearsing what they want to say next. Strategic listeners, people who have turned the act of listening into an active, precise intelligence-gathering operation that gives them massive advantages before they speak a single word. While everyone else is waiting for their turn to talk, the strategic listener is doing something completely different. They're mining the conversation for motivations. They're mapping what's unsaid. They're identifying the emotional pressure points, the hidden priorities, the real fears beneath the stated concerns. And by the time they do speak, they're not guessing what will land. They know. Because you told them. You just didn't realize it. This is the shift that changes everything. Stop treating listening as the pause between your talking and start treating it as the most powerful part of your communication toolkit. Level 1. Emotional archaeology. Every conversation has 2 layers. There's the surface layer, the literal content, the words, the stated topic. And then there's the layer beneath, the emotional reality driving why this person is saying what they're saying, in the way they're saying it to you right now. Someone venting about their workload isn't just sharing a scheduling problem. They might be telling you they feel invisible, undervalued, or close to a breaking point. Someone enthusiastically describing their 5-year plan isn't just sharing information, they're revealing what they most deeply want their life to mean. Someone being overly formal in a casual setting might be covering for insecurity or signaling that they need to be taken seriously. Train yourself to hear the emotion behind the words. Listen for what I call emotional markers. The moments when someone's voice speeds up or slows down, the topics they return to repeatedly, the things they say with unusual energy or unusual flatness. These shifts are like beacons. They're pointing you directly toward what actually matters to this person. And what matters to them is your key to genuine connection and genuine influence. Level 2. Value archaeology. Beneath the emotions, there's something even deeper, a person's core value hierarchy, the invisible ranking system that determines what they're actually optimizing for in their decisions and their life. Some people value security above almost everything. They'd rather keep what they have than risk it for something potentially better. Others are wired for recognition. They need their contribution to be seen and acknowledged, or they disengage entirely. Some are driven by autonomy, some by progress, some by belonging. And most people can't tell you their own value hierarchy if you ask them directly, because it lives below conscious awareness. But it shows up in language. Listen for the patterns. What outcomes do they describe with the most energy when they talk about ideal scenarios? What do they complain about most often? Because complaints are just unmet values in disguise. What do they brag about? Because that reveals the values they feel most satisfied in. Map someone's value system, and you don't just understand them better. You can predict their decisions with striking accuracy and speak directly to what they actually care about. Level 3. Authority. Mapping. Here's a question most people never think to ask in a conversation. Who does this person need to answer to? Not in a political sense, in a psychological one. Whose opinion shapes their thinking? What groups do they identify with? Which experts do they reference or defer to? Understanding someone's authority structure, the invisible web of people and sources they trust, tells you exactly how to position your ideas for maximum acceptance. Listen for who they quote. Notice what sources they mention. Pay attention to the we in their language. Who are they including in that we? When someone says, "My team thinks," or "My mentor always said," or "I read that researchers found," they're handing you the map of their influence network. Align your ideas with their trusted authorities, and you're not just making a case. You're borrowing the credibility of everyone they already believe. Level 4. The excavation sequence. Most people ask questions that feel like interrogation, direct, closed, transactional. What do you want? What's the problem? What's your timeline? These questions get surface answers because they don't invite depth. Strategic listeners ask questions that make people feel genuinely curious about their own thoughts, questions that open doors rather than demanding answers. I call this the excavation sequence, and it works in 4 steps. Start broad and open. What's your take on where things stand right now? Let them talk. Then narrow with a targeted follow-up. What's been the most challenging part of that? Then go emotional. How has that been affecting you? And finally, extract the value. What would a genuinely good outcome look like for you? This sequence doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like someone who's actually interested, and because you are. And by the end of it, you know more about what this person truly needs than most people in their life do. That's not just useful. That's a foundation for real connection. Level 5. Mirroring that creates invisible rapport. People feel most comfortable, most open, most trusting, most willing to be honest with people who feel similar to them. Not in background or opinion necessarily, but in rhythm, in energy, in the texture of how they communicate. Strategic listeners adapt, not by mimicking, that's obvious and off-putting, but by gradually aligning. If someone speaks at a measured, thoughtful pace, you slow down slightly. If they're energetic and quick, you match some of that momentum. If they love concrete specifics, you give them specifics. If they operate in big-picture concepts, you go conceptual. This isn't performance. It's responsiveness. And it creates a kind of invisible comfort that people feel but can rarely name. The sense that talking to you is easy, that you just get them. Level 6. The power of strategic silence. This might be the most underused tool in all of communication. The deliberate pause. Most people are terrified of silence. It feels awkward, empty, like something went wrong. So they rush to fill it with qualifications, with extra explanations, with nervous laughter. And in doing so, they give away enormous amounts of information and leverage. Strategic listeners let silence breathe. After someone finishes speaking, they wait 3, 4, 5 seconds before responding. And almost every time the other person adds something they almost didn't say. A clarification that reveals more than the original statement. A concern they were holding back. A vulnerability they weren't planning to share. Silence creates a gentle pressure that invites disclosure. The person who can sit comfortably in that quiet space while others scramble to fill it holds extraordinary conversational power. In negotiations especially, silence after a question or an offer can be worth more than any argument you could make. Level 7. Listening for what isn't said. The final level of strategic listening goes somewhere most people never think to look. The gaps. People rarely lie outright, but they omit, they gloss over. They speak with careful vagueness about the things they most want to avoid examining. And these omissions are often more revealing than anything they actually say. Develop a habit of noticing what's missing from what someone tells you. What obvious question aren't they asking? What natural concern hasn't come up? What part of the story jumps strangely from one point to another without explanation? The things people don't say, the topics they steer around, the details they leave oddly thin, are often pointing directly at the most important truth in the conversation. Strategic listening transforms every interaction from a simple exchange of words into a rich, intelligence-gathering experience. When you listen at this level, you don't just hear what people say, you understand what they mean, what they need, and what will move them. And when you finally speak, you speak directly into the heart of what matters. Chapter 4. Confidence Projection. How to command the room before you say a word. Let's name something that most personal development content dances around without ever saying directly. Confidence is not a feeling. It's a performance. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually the most liberating thing you might hear today. Because if confidence were purely a feeling, something you either have or don't, depending on your mood or your history or your genetics, then most of us would be at the mercy of our emotional weather. Some days confident, some days not. Some rooms easy, some terrifying. No control, no strategy, no path forward. But elite communicators understand the truth. Confidence is a set of behaviors that can be practiced, refined, and deployed deliberately, regardless of what's happening internally. The external signals of confidence trigger confidence responses in others, and often in yourself. The performance becomes the reality. The act shapes the feeling. Here's how to build it, layer by layer. Layer 1. Your voice is your first impression. Before your content, before your argument, before your ideas land, your voice has already communicated something about your status and your certainty. And most people are unknowingly undermining themselves with vocal habits they've never examined. Speaking too quickly when nervous signals anxiety and signals that your words might not be worth the listener's full attention. Ending statements with a rising intonation, as if every assertion is actually a question, quietly erodes your authority. Filling pauses with like, and kind of, broadcasts uncertainty even when your content is solid. 3 specific adjustments make an immediate difference. First, lower your pitch slightly at the end of sentences. This creates what voice researchers call authoritative intonation, the vocal signature of certainty. Second, slow your pace by about 15%. This forces listeners to pay closer attention and subconsciously signals that what you're saying is worth savoring. Third, replace filler words with silence. When you need a moment to think, pause cleanly and quietly instead of narrating your uncertainty. A clean pause reads as thoughtfulness. Filler words read as doubt. Layer 2. The words that signal mastery. Beyond how you sound, what you say, and how you frame it, either builds or erodes perceived competence in real time. Weak language patterns are so habitual that most people don't hear themselves using them. Now, I think maybe we should consider, I'm not sure, but does that make sense? I'll try to. These phrases aren't just vague. They're actively telling your listener that you're not fully behind your own words. Replace them deliberately. The most effective approach is, instead of, I think maybe we should consider, based on what I've seen, instead of, I'm not sure, but let me know your thoughts. Instead of, does that make sense? I will. Instead of, I'll try. These aren't small changes. They're the difference between someone who has ideas and someone who owns them. And people follow those who own their ideas. Layer 3. Your body communicates first. You walk into a room before you speak in it. And in the seconds before a single word leaves your mouth, people are already forming impressions based entirely on your physical presence. Most people adopt subtle defensive postures without realizing it. Slightly hunched shoulders, arms crossed, gaze drifting, weight shifting from foot to foot. These postures don't just signal low confidence, they actually create it. Biochemically, research shows that expansive, open postures shift hormone levels in ways that increase feelings of power and decrease stress. Claim your physical space, not aggressively, but naturally. Shoulders back, chest open, feet planted when standing. Steady eye contact that moves with intention rather than drifting nervously. Gestures that are deliberate and purposeful rather than fidgety and scattered. When you sit, sit like someone who belongs there, not sprawled, not contracted, but fully present in the space you're occupying. Layer 4. The credibility of strategic vulnerability. Here's something counterintuitive. Projecting complete invincibility actually makes you less credible, not more. Because people know that nobody is invincible. And when someone performs perfect certainty in every direction, no admissions, no acknowledgments, no nuance, something feels off. It triggers skepticism rather than trust. The elite move is strategic vulnerability, carefully chosen moments of transparency that demonstrate self-awareness and intellectual honesty. Acknowledge up front when you're speaking outside your deepest expertise. Address your mistakes quickly and without excess drama. Say, I don't have that specific information, but I'll find out. With the same calm confidence you'd say anything else. These moments don't diminish your authority. They build it because they signal that when you do speak with certainty, you mean it. Layer 5. Preparation is the root of authentic confidence. All the vocal techniques and body language adjustments in the world can't fully compensate for genuine unpreparedness. Real confidence, the deep, unshakable kind, grows from knowing your material so thoroughly that you couldn't be knocked off balance if you tried. Elite communicators don't just prepare their main points. They prepare the edges, the objections, the worst-case scenarios, the questions that might come from left field. They practice key phrases until they're fluent, not rehearsed. They research their audience so they can speak to specific concerns rather than generic ones. The result is a confidence that doesn't need to be performed because it's real. And the difference between performed confidence and earned confidence is something people feel, even if they can't explain it. Layer 6. Reframing nervous energy. Almost everyone experiences anxiety before high-stakes communication. The racing heart, the heightened awareness, the physical charge of knowing this moment matters. Most people interpret this as a warning signal, evidence that they might fail, that they're not ready, that something could go wrong. Elite communicators have learned to interpret that same physiological experience differently. Nervous energy and excited energy feel nearly identical in the body. The only difference is the story you attach to the sensation. I'm nervous and I'm ready produce the same physical state. One is just a more useful frame. Before important conversations, use that energy rather than fighting it. Move your body. A short walk, a few deep breaths, whatever helps you channel the charge into focus rather than freeze. Remind yourself that nervousness means this matters to you, and caring about something is a strength, not a weakness. Layer 7. Adjusting confidence to context. The final dimension of confidence mastery is recognizing that different situations call for different expressions of it. The presence that commands a boardroom is not the same presence that builds trust in a one-on-one conversation. The confidence appropriate in a creative brainstorm looks different from the confidence required in a difficult negotiation. Elite communicators don't have one confidence setting. They have a dial. In formal, high-stakes settings, confidence shows up as preparation and precision. In collaborative settings, it shows up as curiosity and genuine engagement. In relationship-building conversations, it shows up as warmth and attentiveness. In negotiations, it shows up as patient, unhurried calm. Learn to read what kind of confidence the moment is calling for, and deliver exactly that. Not louder, not harder, not more impressive, just right. Calibrated to the moment, grounded in your genuine capability, and expressed with the quiet certainty of someone who knows exactly who they are and what they bring. That's confidence. Not the performance of it, the practice of it, until the practice becomes who you are. Chapter 5. The High-Stakes Communication System. Thriving when everything is on the line. There's a moment most people know intimately, the meeting where the decision gets made, the conversation where the relationship either deepens or fractures, the presentation where your credibility is either established or questioned, the moment where what you say next, and how you say it, will echo forward in ways you can't fully predict. These are high-stakes moments, and here's the hard truth about them. They expose every gap in your communication skill that normal conversations let you hide. In casual interaction, you can coast on goodwill, humor, and decent preparation. But when the pressure rises, when the emotional temperature in the room spikes, when the consequences are real and visible, when there's no room to walk something back, the techniques that work in easy moments aren't always enough. You need something more systematic, more pressure-tested, more deeply internalized. The good news? High-stakes communication is learnable, not just survivable, masterable. And the people who've done it understand something important. The goal isn't to eliminate the pressure. It's to build systems that work because of the pressure, not in spite of it. Principle 1. Emotional regulation. Under fire. When stakes rise, most people go one of two directions. They become aggressive, louder, more forceful, more combative, as if volume could substitute for clarity. Or they go passive, shrinking, hedging, softening every edge until their message has no substance left. Both responses are pressure hijacking your strategy, and both produce outcomes you'll regret. Elite communicators develop what I call emotional neutrality, under fire. not the absence of feeling, but the ability to remain strategically clear-headed while fully feeling the weight of the moment. They can sense the heat in the room without being burned by it. One of the most effective ways to build this is through pressure inoculation, deliberately rehearsing your most challenging scenarios before they happen, not just preparing your talking points, but mentally simulating the difficult moments. What happens when someone challenges you aggressively? What do you do when the room turns against your position? What's your internal response when someone says exactly the thing you were afraid they'd say? When you've already walked through those scenarios in your mind, stayed calm in the simulation, found your footing, responded with clarity, the real version feels less like a crisis and more like a situation you've already navigated. Your nervous system has been pre-trained for intensity, and that makes all the difference. Principle 2. Rapid message construction under time pressure. High-stakes situations rarely give you time to craft the perfect response. Someone asks a pointed question in front of the whole room. A negotiation takes an unexpected turn. A conflict surfaces mid-meeting, and you need to address it now, with everyone watching. What you need isn't more content. It's a framework that lets you construct compelling responses quickly, without falling into the common traps of saying too much, revealing too little, or making commitments you haven't fully thought through. Use the position reason example benefit framework. 4 steps, 10 to 30 seconds each, deployable in virtually any high-pressure moment. First, state your position clearly, not tentatively, not with 20 qualifications, just your position. I think we need to pause this project until we have clearer data. Second, give one strong reason, just one. The temptation is to pile on reasons which actually dilutes your message. One strong reason is more credible than 5 weak ones. Third, anchor it with a specific example, real, concrete, brief. Fourth, name the benefit or consequence. What happens if this position is adopted? What's at stake if it isn't? 4 steps, clear logic, delivered calmly. In high-pressure moments, this structure makes you sound like the most composed, clear-thinking person in the room, because you are. Principle 3. Reading group dynamics in charged rooms. High-stakes communication almost always happens in front of multiple people, and multiple people means multiple agendas, multiple emotional states, and multiple layers of power operating simultaneously, often in ways that have nothing to do with the official topic on the table. Before you speak in any charged group environment, take 30 seconds to map the room. Who holds the actual decision-making authority here? And is it the person with the formal title or someone else? Who are the influencers that others look to before committing to a position? Who might feel threatened by what you're about to say? Who are your potential allies? Your message needs to speak primarily to the decision-maker while acknowledging the concerns of the key influencers. Not because you're being political, but because ignoring the real power structure in a room is like navigating without a map. You might get somewhere, but it probably won't be where you intended. Principle 4. Strategic information management. In high-pressure situations, information is currency. And like any currency, how you manage it determines how much power you hold. Revealing everything you know too early is like playing your hand face up. Revealing too little damages credibility. Elite communicators use what I call graduated disclosure, a deliberate approach to sharing information that preserves optionality and maximizes impact. Start with your strongest, most defensible points. Gauge how they land before moving to more sensitive territory. Keep your most compelling evidence in reserve, not because you're hiding it, but because the moment you deploy it matters enormously. A piece of evidence offered when you're already winning adds polish. The same piece offered when you're facing strong resistance can be a turning point. And when others are strategically withholding information from you, ask direct, specific questions that make vagueness harder to sustain. What specific concerns are driving that position? Can you walk me through the data behind that? These questions don't feel aggressive, but they create gentle, persistent pressure toward transparency. Principle 5. Handling hostility without losing your ground. Some high-stakes conversations involve someone who's playing aggressively. They interrupt, they escalate, they challenge your competence or your motives in front of others. And every instinct you have is screaming at you to either fight back or get out. Neither of those instincts serves you. Use the acknowledge, redirect, refocus technique instead. 3 moves, performed calmly and in sequence. First, acknowledge, not their aggression, but the legitimate concern underneath it. I can see this situation has been genuinely frustrating. This isn't weakness. It's the fastest way to lower someone's emotional temperature. People escalate when they feel unheard. The moment they feel heard, the pressure drops. Second, redirect from the emotional charge to the factual substance. Let's look at what the actual data shows here. You're not dismissing the emotion. You've already acknowledged it. Now you're moving the conversation somewhere productive. Third, refocus on shared objectives. We both want this to work. So let's figure out what actually moves us toward that. This repositions the conversation as collaborative rather than adversarial, which is almost always the more effective frame. Principle 6. Extracting commitments in high-pressure environments. High-stakes conversations often have a specific finish line. You need someone to commit to something, an action, a decision, a next step. And under pressure, people hedge. They defer. They say, "Let me think about it," or "We'll circle back," which, in many contexts, is just a gentler version of no. Elite communicators use the assumption close, a technique so elegant it rarely feels like a technique at all. Instead of asking if they'll do something, you move directly to discussing how they'll do it, as if the decision has already been made. When you roll this out to your team next month, what support structure will you need? As you're implementing this, what's the first milestone you'd want to hit? These questions make non-commitment feel like the awkward, unusual choice, while giving the other person completely natural, easy ways to move forward. Follow up every commitment by confirming specifics in writing within 24 hours. That's where agreements become real. Principle 7. Damage control. When things go sideways. Here's something worth accepting. In high-stakes communication, things sometimes go wrong. You misspeak. You provide incorrect information. You misread the room and say something that lands badly. It happens to everyone, including the best communicators in the world. What separates elite performers isn't that they never make mistakes. It's what they do in the 30 seconds after a mistake. The formula is simple and non-negotiable. Own it immediately. Pivot to the solution. I gave incorrect numbers there. Let me correct that. Then correct it. No excessive apologizing. No lengthy self-flagellation. No defensive explanation of how the mistake happened. Just a clean, quick acknowledgement and an immediate move toward making it right. This approach does something counterintuitive. It builds credibility rather than destroying it, because it demonstrates that you're someone who can handle problems, which is exactly the kind of person people want to trust with important things. Chapter 6. Negotiation Mastery. Designing outcomes where everyone feels like they won. Most people think negotiation is a battle. Two sides, one winner, one loser. The goal: get as much as possible, give up as little as possible, and walk away before the other side realizes what happened. This model is not only unpleasant, it's strategically inferior. Elite negotiators understand something that changes the entire game. The best negotiations feel like collaborations. Both parties leave feeling good about the outcome. And here's the part that might surprise you. The collaborative negotiator almost always gets more of what they actually wanted. Not less, more. Because when people don't feel manipulated, they're more likely to follow through. When they don't feel defeated, they become long-term partners rather than one-time transactions. When they believe the agreement genuinely serves them, they tell others. The reputation you build through collaborative negotiation compounds over years into a network of goodwill that no aggressive tactics could ever purchase. Here's how to do it. Foundation: positions versus interests. Before you negotiate anything, understand this distinction. It will transform every negotiation you ever have. A position is what someone says they want. I need a 20% discount. I need this delivered by Friday. I need the contract terms changed. An interest is why they want it. The underlying need, fear, or priority that the position is meant to serve. People fight over positions because positions are visible and concrete. But positions are almost always negotiable because there are usually multiple ways to satisfy the same underlying interest. The negotiator who focuses on interests rather than positions finds solutions that the position-focused negotiator never sees. You need the discount because your budget was cut unexpectedly. What if we restructured the payment timeline instead? Same interest, different solution. Both parties satisfied. Principle 1. Information asymmetry. The single most powerful advantage you can build before any negotiation is knowing more about their situation than they know about yours. Not through deception or espionage, through genuinely curious conversation in the days and weeks before the negotiation begins. Ask about their broader challenges. Understand their timelines. Learn what success looks like for them internally, not just in this deal, but in their role, their organization, their career. Map their pressures and constraints. Understand what happens for them if this negotiation doesn't reach an agreement. This intelligence isn't a weapon to use against them. It's a tool for finding solutions that actually work for both sides. The person with better information almost always reaches better outcomes because they can see the full picture while others are working from fragments. Principle 2. Anchoring with purpose. The first number mentioned in a negotiation creates a gravitational pull that shapes everything that follows. This is called the anchoring effect, and it's one of the most consistently documented phenomena in all of behavioral psychology. Most people either anchor too aggressively, which creates immediate resistance and signals bad faith, or not at all, which leaves them at the mercy of the other side's anchor. Elite negotiators anchor precisely and logically. They open with a well-researched, ambitious, but defensible number, and immediately walk through the reasoning that justifies it, not aggressively, but clearly. Here's where I'm starting, and here's the thinking behind it. This approach does two things. It shifts the other party's internal reference point, and it establishes you as someone operating from analysis rather than arbitrary demand. Both are valuable. Principle 3, the reluctant concession. Every concession you make in a negotiation sends a signal. Make concessions too easily, and you signal that you had more room all along, which invites the other party to push harder. Make concessions with visible reluctance, and you signal that you're genuinely giving something up, which activates reciprocity and makes them feel they've earned a real win. Even when a concession costs you very little, treat it as significant. Pause before agreeing. Express genuine consideration. That's not something I'd normally include, but given your situation, then make it conditional. I can do that, but if I'm moving on delivery terms, I'd need you to move on payment timing. Every concession should cost them something, even if it's just a small movement on a variable that matters less to them than it does to you. This keeps the negotiation balanced and builds mutual investment in the outcome. Principle 4, expanding the variables. The worst kind of negotiation is one with a single variable, because then every movement toward one party is movement away from the other. It becomes zero-sum by definition. Elite negotiators actively expand the number of variables in play: payment timing, delivery schedule, scope elements, service levels, exclusivity periods, future, commitment options, referral arrangements, warranty terms, training, and support. The more dimensions in play, the more opportunity there is to build creative packages where each party wins on the dimensions that matter most to them. Often, what's expensive for you to provide is inexpensive for them to receive, and vice versa. Finding those asymmetries and building trades around them is where negotiation becomes genuinely creative, and where the best agreements are born. Principle 5, your alternatives are your power. Here's the uncomfortable truth about leverage negotiation. Your power doesn't come from your arguments. It comes from your alternatives. The person who needs this specific deal to work, who has no viable option if this falls through, negotiates from a position of quiet desperation that the other party can sense even when it's never spoken. And the person who has genuinely good alternatives, who could walk away and be fine, negotiates with a relaxed confidence that's almost impossible to fake. This means your most important pre-negotiation work isn't preparing arguments, it's building options. Before any significant negotiation, ask yourself, what's my best alternative if this doesn't work out? Then make that alternative as strong as possible, not as a bluff. As a real option you're genuinely willing to exercise. When you truly don't need this particular deal, you negotiate with a freedom that changes everything. Principle 6, transforming objections into bridges. When someone raises an objection in a negotiation, most people experience it as resistance, something to overcome or argue against. Elite negotiators experience it as information, a signal pointing directly at what matters most to this person. Use the validate, isolate, reframe technique. First, validate. That's a completely legitimate concern to raise. This isn't capitulation, It's acknowledgement, which lowers defensiveness immediately. Second, isolate. If we can find a way to address that specific issue, are there other concerns we'd need to work through? This tests whether the objection is the real barrier or a proxy for something else. Third, reframe. Bring the objection into the context of the full value proposition. The timeline is tight because our process is thorough, which is exactly why our delivery record looks the way it does. Done well, a skillfully handled objection doesn't just neutralize resistance. It actually strengthens your position because you've demonstrated that you can engage with difficulty rather than deflect it. Principle 7, emotional intelligence. Throughout, no matter how good your preparation, no matter how elegant your framework, negotiations involve humans, and humans bring their emotional weather into every interaction, whether they intend to or not. Elite negotiators read emotional states continuously and respond to them strategically. When someone becomes heated, the instinct is to match their energy or to retreat. The master move is neither. It's to remain calm, lower your own register, and say something like, "I can see this really matters to you. Help me understand what's driving that." This response does three things simultaneously. It demonstrates respect, it de-escalates the emotional charge, and it invites them to give you the most valuable information they could possibly share, their real priority. Emotional intelligence in negotiation isn't soft. It's one of the hardest and most valuable skills in the toolkit. And when you can stay clear-headed, empathetic, and strategically focused while others are emotionally activated, you hold an advantage that no amount of data or preparation can replicate. Chapter 7, Advanced People Reading. Decoding what nobody is saying. Out loud. You've been in that conversation before. Something feels off. The words are fine, polite, reasonable, even enthusiastic. But something underneath doesn't quite add up. A slight hesitation where there shouldn't be one. An answer that's technically complete, but somehow hollow. An expression that flickers across someone's face for half a second before the composed version returns. Most people notice these moments and then dismiss them. They tell themselves they're imagining things. They take the surface at face value and move on. Elite communicators don't dismiss those signals. They've trained themselves to catch them, read them accurately, and use them, not to manipulate, but to understand what's actually happening beneath the performance most people maintain in professional and social settings. Here's the foundational truth of advanced people reading. Humans are extraordinarily bad at hiding their internal states. We leak information constantly through our faces, our bodies, our voices, our word choices, our silences, our inconsistencies. The question isn't whether people are broadcasting their real thoughts and feelings. They always are. The question is whether you're trained to receive the signal. Level 1. Establishing baselines. Before you can read deviation, you need to understand normal. Every person has their own baseline communication style, their default pace of speech, their typical level of eye contact, their habitual gestures, how they hold their body when relaxed, what topics they engage with naturally versus which ones seem to create subtle friction. This baseline is their personal normal, and it's different for everyone. Elite people readers spend the opening minutes of any significant interaction in quiet observation mode, cataloging these baseline behaviors before the conversation moves into more consequential territory. Think of it like calibrating an instrument. You need to know what the baseline reading looks like before you can interpret a spike or a dip. Once you know someone's normal, any meaningful deviation from it becomes a data point, not a conclusion, a data point, something to hold, note, and watch for patterns around. The person who's normally fluid and expressive suddenly becomes clipped and careful when a specific topic comes up. That's information. The person who makes relaxed eye contact throughout a conversation looks away consistently when answering one particular type of question. That's information too. Level 2. Micro-expression recognition. Your face tells the truth about a quarter of a second before your social training takes over and arranges it into whatever expression you intended to show. These involuntary flashes, micro-expressions, are universal across cultures. Research pioneered by psychologist Paul Ekman identified 7 that appear in every human population studied: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust, and contempt. They last between a 40th and a 5th of a second, and they reveal genuine emotional responses before conscious control reasserts itself. You don't need to become a forensic expert to benefit from this. You just need to develop the habit of watching for the first flicker, the immediate, unfiltered reaction, before the composed expression settles in. When someone hears your proposal and their face shows a flash of concern before they say, "That sounds great," you're seeing their real response. When someone describes a colleague positively but flashes contempt for a fraction of a second, you've just learned something important. Practice by paying attention to the moment of first reaction in conversations, not the composed response, but the instant before it. Level 3. Reading the voice beyond the words. Most people listen to words. Elite communicators also listen to the voice carrying those words. And those are 2 very different streams of information. The voice reveals emotional and psychological states through 4 dimensions: pace, pitch, volume, and quality. Someone speaking faster than their baseline is typically experiencing heightened arousal, excitement, anxiety, or discomfort. Someone whose pitch rises at unexpected moments is often under stress or navigating uncertainty. Volume drops frequently accompany topics that feel vulnerable or sensitive. And vocal quality? Breathiness, tightness, a slight roughness. Shifts in response to emotional states in ways that are very difficult to consciously control. The most revealing combination is when someone's words and vocal patterns contradict each other. I'm completely comfortable with this direction, delivered in a slightly higher pitch, faster pace, and with a subtle tightness in the voice. Those vocal signals are telling you something the words aren't. Listen for the whole message, not just the verbal layer. Level 4. Body. Language clusters. Here's the mistake most people make with body language. They try to read individual signals in isolation. Someone crosses their arms, defensiveness. Someone looks away, lying. Someone leans forward, interest. These single signal interpretations are unreliable and often flatly wrong. Crossed arms might mean someone is cold. Looking away might mean someone is genuinely thinking. Leaning forward might be habitual posture. What's reliable is clusters, multiple simultaneous signals that all point in the same direction. Defensiveness that's real might look like crossed arms plus slight backward lean plus reduced eye contact plus lips. Pressed together plus voice becoming more clipped. Genuine enthusiasm might look like forward lean plus open gestures, plus increased eye contact, plus animated facial expressions, plus vocal energy rising. The more signals converge on the same interpretation, the more confident you can be. Train yourself to look for convergence, not single data points, and always interpret clusters against the person's individual baseline, not against a universal standard. Level 5. What their words reveal about how they think people's language patterns are windows into their internal world, their processing style, their priorities, their confidence level, their relationship to uncertainty. Pay attention to whether someone uses primarily visual language. I see what you mean. Let me show you. The picture I have is auditory language. That sounds right. I hear what you're saying. Let's talk through it. Or kinesthetic language. I feel like, let me grasp this. It doesn't sit right with me. These preferences reflect how people process information. And when you mirror someone's sensory language back to them, something clicks. It feels like you speak the same language because neurologically you do. Also, listen for the ratio of absolute to qualified language. This will work versus this might work versus I think this could potentially work in some cases. These aren't just style differences, they're calibration differences that reveal confidence levels, personality tendencies, and potential flexibility in their position. Someone who qualifies heavily may be more open to adjustment than their stated position suggests. Someone who speaks in absolutes may need a very different kind of engagement. Level 6. Mapping group power structures. When you're reading people in group settings, meetings, presentations, social gatherings, team conversations, there's an additional layer that most people miss entirely. The invisible architecture of influence and deference. Formal titles and actual influence often don't match. The most senior person in the room isn't always the one everyone is really watching for cues. The quietest person around the table isn't always the least powerful. Sometimes the opposite is true. Map the real power structure by observing these specific dynamics. Who speaks first on a new topic? And does that set the tone for others? Before committing to a position, whose eyes do people glance at briefly, seeking silent confirmation? Whose ideas get built upon enthusiastically, and whose get politely noted and quietly set aside? Who interrupts without consequence, and who gets interrupted without pushing back? These patterns, observed over even a single meeting, reveal the actual decision-making structure operating beneath the official one. And once you can see it, you know exactly who you most need to connect with and what concerns you most need to address. Level 7. Extracting motivation through strategic questions. All the observation in the world gives you signals, but signals need interpretation. And the most reliable way to understand what's really driving someone isn't pure inference. It's asking the right questions in the right way. The most powerful questions for accessing real motivation aren't the obvious ones. What do you want? Produces surface answers. What would success genuinely look like for you in this situation? Reaches deeper. What keeps you up at night about this? Goes deeper still. Because fears and anxieties reveal priorities more honestly than aspirational answers do. If this doesn't go the way you hope, what's the part that concerns you most? Gives you access to the risk landscape that shapes every decision they make. Ask these questions with genuine curiosity, not investigative intensity. The difference in tone produces dramatically different levels of openness in response. Chapter 8. Conflict Resolution Mastery. Turning opposition into your greatest opportunity. Most people's relationship with conflict can be summarized in 2 words. Avoid it. And on the surface, that seems reasonable. Conflict is uncomfortable. It creates tension. It risks relationships. It takes time and emotional energy that most of us feel we don't have. But here's what the avoidance instinct costs you. Every unaddressed conflict is a slow leak. The tension doesn't disappear. It goes underground, where it distorts communication, erodes trust, and gradually poisons the working environment. The disagreement that wasn't resolved in 5 minutes becomes the resentment that derails a relationship 6 months later. Elite communicators have completely reframed their relationship with conflict. They don't just tolerate it, they use it. Because conflict, handled skillfully, is one of the most powerful tools available for deepening understanding, clarifying expectations, and building stronger relationships than existed before the disagreement arose. The shift starts with one crucial insight. Conflict is almost never really about the surface issue. People don't fight about budget numbers. They fight about respect and fairness and whose judgment is being trusted. They don't fight about project timelines. They fight about competence recognition and resource equity and feeling set up to fail. The surface issue is the presenting symptom. The real drivers are emotional and psychological. And until you address those, no amount of logical problem solving will fully resolve the conflict. Principle 1. Conflict composure. The first 30 seconds of a conflict situation often determine everything that follows. When your emotional temperature rises, when you feel the defensiveness, the frustration, the urge to fight or flee, your strategic thinking capacity drops in direct proportion to your emotional activation. Elite conflict communicators have trained a specific physiological response for these moments. Slow the breath deliberately, lower the voice consciously, create a pause before responding. These physical moves aren't just calming techniques. They activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which literally counteracts the stress chemistry trying to hijack your thinking. Your calm in the moment when others are becoming heated is not just a personal virtue. It's a strategic tool. It de-escalates the emotional temperature in the room. It signals to the other person, non-verbally but powerfully, that this situation is manageable. And it preserves your ability to think clearly precisely when clear thinking matters most. Principle 2. Collaborative reframing. The single most powerful shift you can make in a conflict situation is changing the frame from adversarial to collaborative. Instead of 2 people fighting over opposing positions, you become 2 people examining a shared problem together. This reframe doesn't require the other person's agreement. You can establish it unilaterally through your language choices. "You're wrong about this" becomes, "We're seeing this differently. Let's figure out why." "That won't work" becomes, "Let's explore what challenges we'd face with that approach." "This is your fault" becomes, "We have a situation that needs attention." These aren't just softer versions of the same message. They're genuinely different frames. And different frames produce different conversations, different emotional responses, and dramatically different outcomes. Principle 3. Tactical empathy. There's a technique that sounds simple and is profoundly powerful. Explicitly acknowledging the other person's perspective and emotional reality before presenting your own, not agreeing with them, not abandoning your position, simply demonstrating that you've genuinely heard and understood their experience. I understand you're frustrated because the timeline change created real problems for your team's planning. That's a legitimate concern. This statement does something almost miraculous in conflict situations. It drops the other person's defenses, because defensiveness is almost always a response to feeling unheard or dismissed. The moment someone genuinely feels heard, truly, specifically heard, the emotional charge of the conflict begins to dissipate. This is called tactical empathy, and it's not manipulation. It's the recognition that people need to feel understood before they can genuinely listen. Give them that, and you transform the entire dynamic. Principle 4. Separating people from positions. One of the most common conflict traps is position entrenchment. When someone has stated a position publicly and now feels their identity is tied to defending it. Changing their position feels like admitting defeat, losing face, being wrong. So they dig in harder even when part of them recognizes the position may not be serving them. The way through isn't to attack the position more forcefully. It's to gently separate the person from the position, to make it psychologically safe for them to shift without feeling like they're losing. Ask about underlying needs rather than debating stated positions. Help me understand what you're trying to accomplish with that approach. What would need to be true for a different solution to feel workable to you? These questions move the conversation from defending territory to exploring possibilities, and suddenly, solutions appear that the position-focused conversation was making invisible. Principle 5. Strategic timing. Not every conflict is best resolved immediately. In fact, attempting to resolve a conflict while emotions are running at their peak often makes things worse, because neither party has the cognitive and emotional capacity to engage constructively with the real issues. Elite conflict communicators know how to read the emotional temperature in a conversation and make the strategic call. Is now the time to push toward resolution, or is now the time to acknowledge the importance of the issue and create space for cooler heads? This clearly matters to both of us. I want to make sure we address it properly. Can we set aside specific time tomorrow morning when we're both able to give it the attention it deserves? This response does three things. It validates the importance of the issue, it removes the pressure of immediate resolution, and it signals your genuine commitment to working through it. Often, the next conversation happens with dramatically different energy and dramatically better results. Chapter 9. Authority Building. How to Become the Person. Others naturally turn to, here's something worth sitting with. There are people in your professional world, maybe even in your personal world, who don't necessarily have the most impressive titles or the longest resumes. But when they speak, people listen. When they weigh in on a decision, the room takes it seriously. When they recommend something, people act on it. And there are others who have every credential, every title, every formal marker of expertise. And yet somehow their words carry less weight. Their recommendations get noted and quietly set aside. Their presence in a room doesn't shift the energy. What's the difference? Real authority, the kind that actually shapes decisions and earns genuine respect, is not a function of your title. It's a function of perception. And perception, as it turns out, is eminently manageable. People grant authority to those they believe have superior judgment, relevant expertise, and a track record of being right in ways that matter to them. Your job isn't to claim authority. It's to demonstrate the qualities that lead others to grant it freely. Principle 1. Expertise through strategic contribution. Simply being competent is not enough. Competence that's invisible has no influence. The first step in building real authority is becoming the consistent source of valuable thinking in your domain. Not through self-promotion, through contribution. Share insights that help people see something they hadn't noticed. Offer analysis that organizes complexity into clarity. Surface patterns that others are close to but haven't quite articulated. Do this consistently across different contexts and conversations, and over time, people begin to associate you with valuable thinking, which is the foundation of intellectual authority. The key word is consistently. One brilliant insight is memorable. Consistent, valuable contributions become a reputation. And reputation is the long-game version of authority that no title can replicate. Principle 2. Taking on visible challenges. Authority is built in the crucible of difficulty. It's demonstrated not by performing well when things are easy, but by navigating well when things are hard. Strategically volunteer for the high-visibility challenges that others are avoiding. The project that's behind and needs rescuing. The stakeholder relationship that's frayed and needs repairing. The presentation that nobody wants to give. When you step into difficulty and handle it well, your competence becomes undeniable in a way that normal performance never makes visible. Choose these opportunities thoughtfully, based on your genuine strengths and preparation, not on bravado, because the goal isn't to take on challenges for their own sake. It's to create the conditions where your real capability can be seen clearly. Principle 3. Borrowed authority through strategic association authority is partially contagious. People extend more credibility to those who are recognized and associated with others they already respect. Build your authority strategically by cultivating genuine relationships with respected figures in your field. Collaborate on their work. Invite them to contribute to yours. Be present at the events and conversations where respected voices gather. When credible people associate with you publicly, endorse your thinking, reference your work, invite your contribution. Their authority transfers partially to you in the eyes of shared audiences. This isn't about name-dropping or social climbing. It's about genuinely contributing to the communities and conversations where expertise is recognized and letting your participation speak for itself. Principle 4. Consistency as the foundation of trust authority ultimately rests on trust. And trust is built through one thing above all others: consistent follow-through over time. Create regular opportunities to deliver value and then meet them reliably. This might be a weekly insight you share, a monthly analysis you provide, a quarterly strategic input you contribute. The specific form matters less than the consistency. When people come to depend on your contributions, when they start to expect value from you and you reliably deliver it, you've built something more durable than any single impressive performance could create. Consistency is the slow, quiet work of authority building. It's less glamorous than the big moment, but it's what makes the big moment land the way it does, because you've already established the baseline of trust that makes people ready to receive it. Principle 5. Humble authority that attracts rather than repels. The final and perhaps most important dimension of genuine authority is this: The most powerful authority figures wear their expertise lightly. They acknowledge the limits of their knowledge. They give credit generously. They express genuine curiosity about domains outside their expertise. They use their platform to highlight others' contributions, not just their own. And paradoxically, this humility amplifies their authority because it demonstrates that their confidence in their own domain comes from genuine understanding, not from the need to appear superior. Arrogance and authority are often confused, but they produce completely different responses in others. Arrogance creates resentment and distance. Genuine authority, worn lightly, creates trust and attraction. People want to be around it, learn from it, follow it. Build authority by being genuinely excellent at what you do, sharing that excellence consistently and generously, and remaining curious and humble about everything else. That combination, competence plus humility plus consistency, is the formula for the kind of authority that lasts. Chapter 10. Verbal Precision. When every word you choose either opens a door or closes one. Words are not neutral containers for ideas. They are loaded, every single one. They carry emotional weight, historical associations, psychological triggers, and subtle implications that operate below the level of conscious awareness in the person receiving them. Two sentences can carry identical factual content and produce completely opposite emotional responses, based entirely on word choice. Most people treat language like a rough approximation tool. They say roughly what they mean and hope the listener fills in the gaps charitably. Elite communicators treat language like a precision instrument. They understand that the specific words they choose, not just the ideas behind them, are doing real work in the listener's mind. And they choose accordingly. The first dimension, presuppositions that bypass resistance. Here's a subtle but powerful technique. Instead of directly stating what you want someone to believe or do, which triggers evaluation and potential resistance, you embed that assumption into the structure of your sentence so it gets accepted before conscious scrutiny can engage. Compare these two sentences. If you decide to move forward with this versus when you move forward with this, the factual content is nearly identical. The psychological effect is completely different. The first invites the listener to consider whether they'll proceed. The second assumes they will and moves directly to what comes next, gently, almost invisibly programming the expectation of forward movement. Do you think this approach could work? Invites doubt. How do you think this approach will work best? Assumes it works and asks only about optimization. These embedded assumptions aren't deceptive. They're directional. They guide thinking rather than demanding conclusions. And that guidance, applied consistently, shapes conversations in profound ways. The second dimension, temporal language that creates natural momentum. How you reference time influences how people feel about decisions and actions, more than most people realize. Connect positive outcomes to immediate action and negative consequences to delay, not through pressure, but through honest framing. The sooner we address this, the more options we'll have creates forward momentum without manufactured urgency. Every week, this stays unresolved. The complexity increases, helps someone feel the genuine cost of inaction. These patterns aren't manipulative, they're accurate, and they help people feel the natural time pressure of their situation rather than ignoring it. The third dimension, certainty calibration. Different moments require different levels of certainty in your language. The skill is matching your language to your actual knowledge and the situation's requirements, projecting appropriate confidence without overclaiming. When you have strong evidence and need to project conviction, this will produce, when you're less certain but still making the case, based on what we've seen, this is likely to. When you're genuinely speculating, one possibility worth exploring is, matching your certainty language to your actual knowledge does something crucial. It builds calibration trust. When people know that your "this will" means genuinely high confidence and your "this might" means genuine uncertainty, your confident statements carry far more weight, overclaim consistently, and your certainty language stops meaning anything. The fourth dimension, emotional word selection. Every word you use to describe a situation shapes how people feel about that situation, and how they feel determines how they decide. Cost reduction and efficiency improvement describe the same operational reality, but one activates connotations of scarcity and sacrifice, while the other activates connotations of optimization and growth, problem and opportunity for improvement. Same reality, completely different emotional framing. Failure and learning experience, same event, vastly different psychological response. This isn't spin. It's recognizing that framing is real, that how something is described genuinely shapes how it's experienced, and that you have a choice about which accurate description you reach for. Choose words that create the emotional conditions most conducive to the outcomes you're working toward. The fifth dimension, specificity, as a credibility signal. Specific language builds credibility. Vague language invites doubt. Our approach significantly improves results is forgettable and unverifiable. Our approach reduced onboarding time by 34% in the first quarter is specific, concrete, and memorable. The specificity signals that you've actually done the work, that you know the details because you were there, not because you're repeating a general claim you read somewhere. Use specificity when you want to build credibility and proof points. Use intentional generality carefully when you want to build consensus around a broader principle that more people can agree with. This approach consistently drives better outcomes, is harder to argue with than a specific number, which some people can challenge with their own data. Know which mode serves your objective in each moment. The sixth dimension, questions that guide rather than ask. Questions are among the most powerful tools in language, not primarily because they gather information, but because they direct thinking. Every question you ask forces the listener to process information in a specific direction, and the direction their thinking goes shapes the conclusions they reach. Instead of telling someone they should prioritize a project, ask, given everything you're trying to accomplish this quarter, what would be the real impact of completing this project versus pushing it to next month? Now they're thinking through your logic and reaching your conclusion, independently, genuinely, in their own mind. That's far more persuasive than any argument you could make directly. Chapter 11, Persuasion Mastery. When people convince themselves, the highest form of persuasion doesn't feel like persuasion at all. When it works perfectly, the other person doesn't feel convinced by you. They feel clarity, like they've finally seen something they knew was there but couldn't quite articulate. Like the decision they're making is the obvious one, the one that simply makes sense given everything they already know and value and want. That experience of arriving at a conclusion that feels genuinely your own is what elite persuasion creates, not through trickery or manipulation, through deep understanding of how human decision-making actually works and the patient, skillful creation of conditions where the right decision becomes the natural one. Here's the foundational insight. Humans make decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. The emotional response comes first, fast, and largely below conscious awareness. The rational justification follows, and its primary function is to make the person feel good about the decision they've already emotionally made. This means that leading with facts and hoping for emotional buy-in is working backwards. Elite persuaders create emotional resonance first. Then they provide the logical framework that allows people to feel smart about the direction they already want to move. The architecture of desire. Before you try to persuade anyone of anything, spend time understanding what they already deeply want. Not what they say they want, but what's actually driving them. Don't ask directly. Direct questions produce surface answers. Instead, ask about their ideal outcomes. Ask about their biggest frustrations with how things currently are. Ask about previous experiences, what worked, what didn't, and what they wish had been different. Listen for the emotional drivers underneath the rational explanations. Listen for the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Then position your proposal not as something new you're asking them to accept, but as the most direct path to where they already wanted to go. You're not changing their destination. You're showing them a better route to it. Resistance preemption. Most people wait for objections and then scramble to overcome them. This creates adversarial dynamics. The other person has committed to a concern publicly and now feels pressure to defend it. Elite persuaders address likely concerns before they're raised, which does something remarkable. It makes the objection feel like a known quantity rather than a discovery, something you've already thought through, not something that's surprising you. You might be wondering whether this is realistic to implement given current bandwidth. That's exactly the question we asked, and here's what we found. This approach demonstrates thoroughness, builds credibility, and removes the objection as a barrier before it ever becomes one. Commitment, escalation. Big agreements are built from small ones. The psychology of consistency means that each small yes makes the next yes easier, because people want to remain coherent with their previous positions and statements. Start by building agreement around the problem or the desired outcome, not the solution. Do you agree that the current approach isn't producing the results we need? Would it be valuable to address this before the next quarter? Each affirmative answer is a small step that builds psychological momentum toward larger agreement. By the time you present the full proposal, you're not asking them to take a leap. You're asking them to take one more step in a direction they've already been moving. The scarcity of real windows. Authentic urgency is one of the most powerful forces in persuasion and one of the most commonly misused. Artificial deadlines and manufactured pressure are transparent, and when people sense them, trust evaporates. But real urgency, the genuine window that genuinely closes, is extraordinarily motivating when communicated honestly. Help people see the urgency that already exists in their situation. Market position shift. Competitive advantages erode. Problems that are manageable today compound into crises 6 months from now. Opportunities genuinely do move to those who act faster. You don't need to create pressure. You need to help people accurately perceive the pressure that's already there. While this conversation is happening, the situation isn't staying still. What's the cost of another 3 months of delay? That's not manipulation. That's honesty about reality. Chapter 12. Digital Communication Excellence. Your screen presence is your new first impression. The rules of influence haven't changed, but the medium has. Fundamentally, rapidly, and permanently, a significant portion of your most important professional relationships now exist, primarily through screens and text. Your reputation in those relationships is built not just through what you say, but through how you communicate digitally. Your response patterns, your written clarity, your video presence, your ability to create genuine connection through technology that was never designed for it. Most people are significantly less effective through digital channels than they are in person. The absence of body language, vocal tone, and physical presence strips away signals they rely on unconsciously, and they've never learned to compensate deliberately. Elite digital communicators have made that compensation deliberate, and the gap between them and everyone else has never been wider. Virtual presence. Projecting through the screen, video calls have a flattening effect. Energy gets absorbed. Subtlety gets lost. The physical presence that communicates confidence and engagement in person becomes invisible through a laptop camera, unless you actively compensate. The practical adjustments that matter most. Camera positioned at eye level, not looking up or down at you, which creates natural psychological equality. Lighting that clearly illuminates your face without harsh shadows, because your face is doing the communicative work that your whole body would do in person. And energy. Project about 20% more than feels natural. What feels slightly over-animated in your own perception comes across as appropriately engaged on the other side of a screen. What feels normal to you reads as flat and low energy to your audience. Written persuasion without vocal cues. Email and written messaging require you to create rapport, build interest, and guide decision-making using only words and structure. There's no tone of voice to soften a direct statement, no smile to signal warmth, no pause to create emphasis. Every signal must come from the writing itself. Structure written. Communication using the attention, interest, desire, action framework. Grab attention in the subject line or opening sentence with specificity and relevance, not generic pleasantries. Build interest immediately by connecting to something that matters to the reader. Create desire by painting a clear picture of the outcome or benefit. Drive action with a specific, frictionless next step. Every written communication should arrive somewhere at a clear request, question, or next step, not trail off into vague openness. Asynchronous influence. Across time, digital communication often happens with delays, hours, sometimes days between messages. This requires a completely different discipline than real-time conversation. The ability to craft messages that carry their full meaning without the context of an ongoing exchange. Front-load your key points. Don't bury the most important information 3 paragraphs in after extensive context setting. Make your message self-contained. Include enough background that it's intelligible without requiring the reader to search through a thread. End with a specific question or request that gives them a clear, easy path to respond. Messages that end with clarity get responses. Messages that trail off get deferred indefinitely. Attention in a distracted world. Every digital message you send is competing with a dozen other notifications, a full inbox, a calendar packed with meetings, and the general cognitive overload of modern professional life. Your message will be read, if it's read at all, by someone whose attention is fractured and whose time feels perpetually short. Design your written communication for scanning first, reading second. Use white space generously. Bold the one or two phrases that carry your core message so someone who skims in 10 seconds still gets the essential point. Keep paragraphs short and focused on single ideas. Structure information so the most important thing is visible in the first 3 seconds of someone opening your message. If they read nothing else, what absolutely must they see? Put that first. Chapter 13. Presentation Domination. From surviving the room to commanding. Most people approach presentations as a test to pass, a performance to survive, something to get through without visibly failing. Elite presenters approach them as an opportunity to shift thinking, change perspectives, move people toward action, and demonstrate the kind of leadership that's visible only when someone stands in front of a room and guides it somewhere. The fundamental reframe is this: your audience doesn't primarily want information. They want transformation. They want to leave the room feeling different than when they entered. Clearer, more motivated, equipped with something they didn't have before. Your job isn't to deliver content. It's to create an experience that changes something. Narrative architecture, the journey structure. Great presentations are not organized as collections of information. They're organized as journeys, with a beginning that establishes where the audience is, a middle that moves them through new territory, and an end that lands them somewhere meaningfully different. Use the problem agitation solution structure as your backbone. Establish a problem your audience genuinely recognizes, not a generic challenge, but the specific friction point that's real in their world. Agitate that problem by exploring its consequences, its costs, its compounding effects if unaddressed. Then present your solution as the logical, almost inevitable resolution to the problem you've just made viscerally real. Throughout, make the stakes personal. Connect the problem and solution to each audience member's individual reality, not just their organization or industry in the abstract. Vocal command, the instrument you always have with you. Your voice is your primary tool for managing audience energy and attention, and most people use it on a single setting. Consistent pace, consistent pitch, consistent volume, which over 20 minutes produces an almost hypnotic monotony that audiences slide away from without even realizing it. Elite presenters use vocal variety as a deliberate tool. Slow down for the points you most want to land. The deceleration itself signals to the audience. This matters. Receive it carefully. Speed up during transitions to maintain momentum. Lower your pitch to convey gravity and authority. Raise it to express genuine excitement or urgency. Use silence before your most important points. A full 2 or 3 seconds of quiet before a key statement gives it a weight that no amount of verbal setup can create. Managing resistance in the room. Every audience includes skeptics, people with different agendas, people who came in unconvinced and are looking for reasons to stay that way. The instinct is to avoid them, to direct your energy toward the receptive faces and hope the skeptics come along. The elite move is the opposite. Acknowledge the resistance directly, early, and confidently. Some of you may be wondering whether this applies to your specific context. That's a fair question, and I want to address it. This does something powerful. It demonstrates that you know your material well enough to engage with difficulty, which is one of the strongest credibility signals available to a presenter. When challenging questions arise, receive them warmly and use them. That's exactly the kind of question this should raise. Let me address it. Your graceful, confident engagement with the hardest questions in the room often persuades skeptics more effectively than anything in your prepared content. Chapter 14, Relationship Acceleration, Compressing Years of Trust into Weeks. Here's the belief worth challenging, that deep, meaningful relationships simply take time, that there's no way to accelerate genuine connection without cheapening it. The reality is more nuanced. Time is one input into trust and connection, but it's not the only one. Quality of interaction is a far more powerful driver than quantity of time, and elite relationship builders have learned to create, within single conversations or short sequences of interactions, the quality of understanding and mutual investment that most people take years to develop. This isn't about manufacturing false intimacy. It's about creating the conditions, genuine interest, authentic vulnerability, real value exchange, honest communication that make connection happen faster. Rapid trust through vulnerability and competence. Trust has two components: benevolence, the belief that someone wants good things for you, and competence, the belief that they can actually deliver on that goodwill. Relationships stall when either element is missing. Elite relationship builders establish both components quickly and authentically. They share appropriate stories about their own mistakes and what those mistakes taught them, signaling humanity and genuine self-awareness. They offer genuinely useful contributions early, insights, introductions, resources that demonstrate real capability and real interest in the other person's success. And they follow through on even the smallest commitments faster and more thoroughly than expected, because reliability in small things signals reliability in large ones. Value front-loading, the transactional approach to relationship building, give a little, see what you get back, give a little more, is slow and creates a calculating dynamic that people can feel. Elite relationship builders give first and give generously, before there's any obvious reason to expect a return. They identify what the other person most needs and find ways to provide it early. Information they're seeking, an introduction that would move something forward, a perspective that genuinely helps them see their situation more clearly. The key is that this giving is real, not strategic performance. It comes from genuine interest in the other person's success, and people can feel the difference. Shared experience as connection infrastructure abstract connection. Agreeing that you have similar values or comparable experiences creates some rapport, but shared experience creates something deeper. Actual joint memory, actual cooperation under real conditions, actual evidence of how you each show up. Create shared experiences intentionally. Collaborate on something real. Work through a genuine challenge together. Engage in a learning experience side by side. The specific activity matters less than this. That it requires real engagement from both parties creates something neither could have done alone and leaves both people with a memory that belongs to the relationship, not just to each individual. Chapter 15, the communication mastery integration. Building your elite operating system. You've now covered 15 chapters of frameworks, techniques, principles, and practices. And if you've been reading carefully, you've noticed something. These skills don't exist in isolation. They build on each other. They reference each other. They form, when integrated, a coherent operating system for human interaction. But here's the thing about operating systems. Having the individual components isn't the same as having them work together seamlessly. The final step, and the most important one, is integration. From techniques to intuition. Elite communicators don't consciously select techniques during conversations. They don't pause mid-sentence to think, this calls for the PrEP framework, or I should deploy the anchoring principle here. Their skills have been practiced deeply enough that they've moved below conscious decision-making into genuine intuition, automatic, fluid, responsive. This is the nature of any mastered skill. The pianist who's practiced enough doesn't think about finger placement. The experienced surgeon doesn't consciously think through each movement. The skill has become embodied, part of how they move through the world rather than something they do deliberately. You get there the same way. Deliberate practice, consistent application, and systematic reflection. After every significant conversation, spend 5 minutes reviewing it. What worked? What didn't land the way you intended? What would you do differently? What did you learn about the other person, the situation, or yourself? This reflection loop is what transforms experience into mastery, and it's available to you after every single interaction you have. The meta skill, situational reading. Above all the individual skills, above strategic listening and verbal precision and negotiation mastery, there's a meta skill that makes all of them work. The ability to read a situation accurately and quickly, and to select the right approach for what this specific moment actually needs. Is this a moment for assertive directness or patient listening? Is this situation calling for structured logic or emotional resonance? Is this person ready to receive your proposal, or do they need more groundwork first? Is the room with you or against you? And what does each response require? Developing situational reading means approaching every communication encounter with genuine curiosity, rather than a preset script. It means staying flexible when your initial read turns out to be incomplete. It means being willing to abandon a prepared approach mid-conversation because you're paying enough attention to recognize that something different is needed. The communicators who seem effortlessly masterful are almost always simply the most attentive. They notice more, adjust faster, and trust their observations enough to act on them. The value creation orientation. Here's the mindset that makes all of these techniques work sustainably. Genuine orientation toward creating value for others. Every technique in this book can be used manipulatively to extract what you want from people without regard for their interests. And every technique in this book, when applied from a genuine desire to help people make better decisions, build better outcomes, and achieve what they actually want, becomes not just more ethical, but more effective, because people can sense the difference, not always consciously, but in their gut, in the quality of their trust, in the depth of their openness with you. When someone feels that you're genuinely trying to help them, not perform helpfulness while actually pursuing your own agenda, they respond with a level of openness and cooperation that no technique can manufacture. Start every significant communication with the question, how can this interaction genuinely serve everyone involved? Not just you, not just them, everyone. That orientation, held consistently, expressed genuinely, is the foundation that makes every other skill in this book work the way it's meant to. Continuous development as a way of being. The final thing worth saying about communication mastery is that it has no end point. There is no moment when you arrive, when you can put down the tools and coast on what you've built. The conversations keep coming. The situations keep evolving. The people keep surprising you. And each new interaction brings new complexity, new challenges, new opportunities to apply what you know and discover what you still have to learn. Elite communicators aren't people who finished learning. They're people who made learning a permanent condition of how they engage with the world. They're still curious after decades of practice. They're still reflecting after years of expertise. They still notice what didn't quite land and wonder why, and what they could do differently next time. That orientation, perpetual curiosity, perpetual reflection, perpetual growth is ultimately what separates those who plateau at good from those who continue developing toward genuine mastery. You now have the frameworks, you have the principles, you have the techniques, and the understanding of why they work. What comes next is entirely yours. Every conversation you have from this moment forward is practice. Every interaction is data. Every relationship is an opportunity to apply what you've learned, observe what happens, and refine your approach. Think faster, talk smarter, connect deeper. The conversation starts now.